it was shuttered in along the German kiln, you know. God, mate, it was lethal altogether, like, you know, like the ducks were dipped in a mixture of sulphur and tar and pitch, you know, and the smell of it. Even a bath wouldn't have took the smell of it off you.
Well, I remember as a lad walking down that road, and I mean the smell more or less hung over the town. That sulphur, you didn't really realise it.
Smell hung over the town. The sulphur, like, you know, bags and bags of sulphur, like, you know, and as I say, pitch and it was poured in round the faucet and the socket of the duct. They were for the GPO, you know, for telephone lines and that type of thing, you know. Like, they were just in their thousands, just, you know, and there were several men there chipping. You would have heard the ring of the chisel and the hammer chipping the ends off them for to leave them rough, so as the pitch would tick to them, you know. And there was a lot of men. There was 3 shifts at one stage going on them, like, just hammering tongues. It never quit.
But I remember people who were walking on any bit of change and all they had in their pocket was actually turned black in their pocket. What effect did that have on men's lungs and all when you think about it?
Well, whenever you think of it, like, you know, there's not a big lot of those men about now, you know. But, like, you know, Sunday morning they used to nip up to the 8:30 Mass up in St Mary and St Joseph's, you know, for Mass, and they'd all have stood at the back of the chapel. And the smell of the duck house just was all over the place, you know. And in fact, this would have lingered on for most of Sunday morning in the chapel. But then, as I said, then there was the stocking ground itself. You know, at that time, the catalogue for the yard, there was 650 items from I can remember on that catalogue. You know, like there was pipes.
They were manufactured down there.
Yeah, there was pipes of all dimensions. You know, well, I never done 24-inch, but I certainly done 18-inch, 15-inch. 12-inch, 9-inch, 4-inch, 3-inch. You know, they were all the different diameters of pipes, and there were fittings. There were fittings made to fit each one of those pipes. Bends, junctions, rainwater shoes. You know, just an endless catalogue of stuff for to suit those pipes for sewerage or indeed for GPO or whatever requirement that they had, you know. There was a lot of stuff.
So when then did the plastic and all start to impact on as a consequence the huge reduction in the workforce?
Well, the plastic, God, oh, I can't remember when it came in, you know. But like when it did come in, it came in and maybe 15-foot lengths, maybe 20-foot lengths, you know. And like a pipe at that time was about 3 foot, you know. So, you know, even on 18 foot, for instance, like that was about 6 pipes, you know. So you could really see the damage that it was going to do, you know, and it certainly did do it. Like, you know, the crockery pipe started to wane off. The GPO, which at that time was a big, like it was a big employer throughout the yard at that time, you know. They was beginning to use the plastic material as well, you know, and all those cutbacks gradually came, and men started to disappear, you know. Departments started to close down, and well, at the finish, whenever the yard finished with Hepworth. It was Hepworth that was running at that time. You know, they were an English company. There were about 72 or 73 of us left, you know, and then the yard eventually did close, and a local fella here in the town here, Hugh Cullen had great interest in it at the time. He had been manager prior to its closing. He had been the manager and whatnot, and he really had a big interest in that type of thing, and he set out to buy the yard, which he achieved, and he did. He bought the yard, him and another fella named Hewitt, you know, and gradually started to build up again, but never ever got to the same workforce, you know. It was finished up, I suppose, maybe there might have been 20 or 30 of us left in the yard, you know. But like that continued maybe for another 20 odd years, you know, which it was unfortunate in the first instance that it didn't stay in local hands, because, you know, as far as I'm concerned, local industry is safe. You know, you get these international companies in, big companies, and they come in with big grants and all the rest. Like, you know, they're only there for what they can get out of it. Like, they're not really interested in the locality. You know, where I would have to say fair play to Hugh Cullen. You know, he had the town at heart. You know, he certainly had the town at heart, and he maintained employment in that there up until Schiedel bought it, German outfit. Well, you know, I knew myself the writing was on the wall whenever they came in. Like, they were a huge, big German company. I think maybe they were part of the Lafarge outfit, you know, and there was no way they were going to handle the way we were making pipes and the volume of pipes that we were making were hundreds, maybe thousands a week less than their requirement, you know. They had a big factory in Germany which was capable of turning out, well, they told us at the time anyway, 1 million pipes a week, 1 million flue liners a week, you know. And we knew we weren't going to compete with that. So
you mentioned earlier on there about the German kiln. There always seems to have been a German connection of some kind in engineering terms with the yard. Why was that? Was there no Irish or British engineers capable of producing kilns and all the way that the Germans seemed to?
You know, to go back, well, whenever I was a lad, the Germans installed that kiln that was down there. It was called the German kiln, and that's all it ever got, was the German kiln. You know, there was, what was it? There was a 14 small kilns within that. You know, the fire started at would say number 1 chamber. You know. And whenever number 1 would have been burnt, they pulled the damper. Now, all was between number 1 and number 2 chamber was brown paper, you know. And the minute they pulled the damper, the fire passed through to the next chamber, and number 1 was closed down, and number 2 was opened up, and it started to fire, and that continued right down.
But each kiln was individually being filled.
Each one was individual, but
well, number 1 was being lit, number 2 was being filled, and so on.
Yeah, and you can imagine they were small. They were small chambers, you know, and whenever you'd have been emptying number 1, number 2 was in full fire. You know, full fire. You're talking about maybe 1100 degrees. You know, and always between you and it was maybe about a 10-inch wall.